are back. Yubel just sent me something. Okay. So yeah, WotY. We're gonna keep reading book 3. So, yeah. I just gotta scroll down to find it, where we left off, so just give me 1 second here. No, here we are. That was quick. Okay. Got my water. Right here. I'm gonna... You know what? Oh, my headphones. 1 second while I turn off my headphones and plug them in. They were beeping at me all throughout the, whatchamacallit, Peggle stream. So, where's the cord for that? You know what? I'm not going to take a whole bunch of time to look for that cord. That's not why y'all are here. Nice. Okay, so just real quick, the chat for this is now a no spoiler zone for the Ava movie. I'm sure you all know the rules by now for WotY reading streams, but just in case you don't, they're very simple. It's more rules for me, really. It's that I cannot... You are welcome to chat, to react, whatever. It's fine. Go for it, please. But I cannot reply to you. I can't, I can't react or anything to what you're saying due to the fact I try not to break the flow of how the stream goes. So, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna get started. We're at 2 weeks later. Her bag packed, Usuko gave Kurako a long hug before saying goodbye and heading towards Naho Bay. To set the Pinkettes' mind at ease, Sakura would be moving into the girls' apartment while Usuko was gone, and 2 members of Cryptid Ranger were staying in Nonami's next-door unit as backup on the off chance someone attacked the building. "Bring me back a coconut, will ya?" called Sakura from the main entrance as Usuko waved goodbye. It was still very early, and the trip to Kaiju Island was going to take up most, if not all, of the day. Hold on 1 second, there's something I need to do here. There we go. If they wanted any chance of getting there before nightfall, they had to leave when it was still dark. "Trust me," Emiko had said when discussing the trip with the rest of the team. "You do not want to make land there at night. It's dangerous in the day as is, but when the sun falls, well, you don't want to be outside when that happens. Let's just leave it there." Those had been the last words Usuko had heard from Emmy since. It had been nearly a week now. 2 since they'd voted 4-2 to visit the island, and she hadn't been able to get a hold of her or Nonami. According to Ray, the 2 were very busy working on a survival plan, what they'd need to build a shelter, find food, and all that. Usuko understood, but she still found herself missing Emiko. At least on this trip, they'd be able to see each other again. And what's more, they'd probably get quite a bit of privacy and... "Ah! So lewd!" shouted a red-faced Usuko, interrupting her thoughts of hand-holding as she walked the dark streets. That was not a good read. Apologies for that. She almost found it funny. This time last year, she would have never dared to be out this late by herself. But now? She almost wished someone would come and try something. She wanted to see the look on their face when she smacked them with her magic bat. As if on cue, 3 thugs emerged from an alleyway to block her path. "Sure is late to be out, girlie," said the first, a brute of a man with arms covered in tattoos. "What say yous come with us, eh?" said the second, a thin twig of a man with a perpetual sneer on his face. "We can show you some fun, can't we, boys?" They shared a brief laugh, and Usako even joined in. Something was approaching them from behind, and Usako knew exactly what it was. Or rather, who. What's so funny?" asked Tats, already confused why the target was also laughing. "Oh, that's simple," replied Usako, stoically, pointing at them. "You are already dead. Omae wa mou shinderu." As if on cue, two massive blue arms descended on the two men in the back's shoulders, as the Shutendoji form of Emiko slid between them, silver hair hanging loose and long, concealing her face behind a menacing shadow. "Gentlemen, I will only say this once. Leave the girl alone, or I will pick my teeth with your bones." She then effortlessly lifted them into the air by their arms and flung them back to the ground. Twigman, seeing his compatriots twitching on the ground in craters, decided it was much wiser to flee than risk the wrath of a demon. Once he was long gone, and the other men had been dragged to a nearby clinic's doorstep, Emiko shifted back to normal and approached Usako once more. "Sorry about that, Use-chan," she said, taking the pinkette's hand in her own. "I've just always wanted to do that." "You okay?" "Of course, Emi-chan," giggled Usako, as the two began walking towards the south side of town. Between the southern harbor and their current location was an old warehouse that, whenever the pinkette would go by during the day, seemed completely abandoned. Tonight, however, it was the total opposite. Where once stood a dilapidated, rusting hulk of a building, was now a brightly lit, open-air market. Dozens upon dozens of yokai, monsters, and spirits were wandering around, mingling or buying things. There were even some familiar faces in the crowd, Usako realized. A couple of former teachers, and even some residents in her building, were there, just in their true forms. "What is this place?" she breathed, taking it all in. "Well, there's no official name for it," explained Emiko as she shifted back to her regular Oni form and joined the crowd. "But it's a known safe place for our kind to just be ourselves for a while. It's not easy living your life, having to hide your true self from the world. This festival, market, whatever you want to call it, it lets us be us. The reason you can see it now, and not before, is because of your yokai crystal. It lets you pierce the illusion. As for me, I'm an Oni. Illusions are sorta my thing." As they wandered around, Emiko explained that Usako may wish to hide her crystal so as to avoid having to explain why she wasn't in her true form. It wasn't a rule that you had to be, but it would certainly raise questions that the truth would only make awkward. "So is this a monthly thing?" asked the pinkette, as she examined a mask stall, hoping to find a Sailor Moon mask to no avail. "Nope, nightly," replied Emiko, pointing the faceless Nopparabo shopkeeper to the one she wanted, one of the rider mask of WotY. "More accommodating that way, you know?" Usako nodded in reply. Then an odd sound made its way to her ears. It sounded like arguing, but intermixed with dog growls and cat hisses. Making her way to the source, she found another stall, run by what appeared to be an elderly black werewolf and a graying but clearly tortoiseshell cat girl of Latin American descent. Both were currently in the middle of some sort of argument. Over what, Usako couldn't tell. Okay, so, just real quick, I want to apologize for my... I can't do a Spanish accent, so I'm not going to try. But this character is supposed to have, like, the kind of, you know... Anyway. "I told you to double check, pendeja!" yelled the cat girl. "Now we're, as they say, up a creek without a paddle. Dios mío! Don't go blaming me, Bonita, shot the werewolf right back. I did check it. I think our stock boy must have helped himself on the way here. Remind me to give him a whooping later. I know Bentley better than that, exclaimed the cat girl, Bonita. I think old age has just finally caught up with you, Lacey. Usako, not wanting to get caught in the middle of that argument, simply waited for them to notice her. As soon as they did, the werewolf, Lacey, did her best to apologize. Well, we're supposed to be selling hard candy and the produce my husband farms, she explained when Usako asked what was wrong. But apparently someone's nephew got hungry on the way here and ate most of the candy. We don't have very much, but if you're interested, it's very good. Ever had rhubarb? Blackberries? These are made with fresh ones straight from our garden. She reached into a burlap sack and pulled out a handful of blackberries, offering them to Usako. Go ahead, dear, try some. With slight hesitation, Usako popped one of the berries into her mouth. Immediately, it was filled with a rich, sweet, but also sour flavor that tickled her tongue and danced on her taste buds. These are delicious, she exclaimed. Let me think. Hey, Emmy-chan, come here a sec, will ya? As Emmy made her way over, her eyes lit up when she saw the two old women. Their faces were equally happy to see the approaching Oni, and they leaned over the rickety wooden stall to give her a big hug. It's been ages since we saw you, Emiko, said Bonita, her words rushing together. Why, I'd almost begun to think you'd moved away or something. Okay, here's some Spanish. ¿Has estado bien? ¿Ella es tu amiga? Sí, sí, replied Emiko with a laugh, speaking Spanish as fluently as she did Japanese or English. Su nombre es Usako, y en realidad es mi novia. Bonita's gaze and point went from Emmy to Usako and back several times before she exclaimed, Maravillosa! What? Called Lacey, her ears perked up to try and hear better, but to no avail. You know I can't understand you when you're speaking like that. I said this is my girlfriend, Usako, answered Emiko. We've known each other for years. I've told you about her before, in fact. We started dating a couple months ago. Oh, that's nice, replied the dog woman. Weird, but nice. Happy for you, Emmy. Usako turned to Emiko for a minute. You know them? She asked. I do, replied Emmy. Bonita is one of Mother's closest friends. She was practically like an aunt to me growing up. Lacey, too. The two of them are like sisters. They live on a farm far to the west where Lacey's husband does most of the work. Been in their family for generations, apparently. When Emiko turned around again, Lacey and Bonita each had a bag to hand the girls. It's not much, but consider it a gift, said Bonita, handing her bag to Emiko. As I said, there isn't much candy, but here's what we do have. Don't worry, take it, really. I insist. And I insist you take these, said Lacey, with a big, toothy, friendly grin. You like my blackberries so much, have some on me. Oh, don't fuss. There's plenty more. We won't go broke. Both Emiko and Usako bowed deeply in gratitude. Okay, I just want to pause real quick. Those two are actually named after my childhood pets who have passed away. I wanted to immortalize them, so to speak. So, yeah. As they made their way out and back towards the harbor, Usako made a mental note to come back here sometime. She had a really fun time, as short as it was, and she definitely hadn't had a chance to see everything. So Usako definitely was coming back again and bringing Emiko. Walking hand in hand once more, Emiko, now in human form again, tried some of the hard candy she had been given. It was like a sheet of ice, easy to break off and flavored like the rhubarb that grew on the werewolf's farm, and the taste took Emiko back to her childhood for a moment. Snapping off another piece, she offered it to Usako, who promptly accepted it. Though Usako... Oh, I'm supposed to say what? Though Usako wasn't a fan of sour flavors. Oh, no, that's right. Though Usako was a fan of... Bleh! I can't read, sorry. I'm so embarrassed. Though Usuko was a fan of sour flavors, she found the taste to be different. Not bad, certainly, but unlike anything she'd tried before. Maybe it was due to the natural ingredients used, but she knew she definitely liked it, and if Emiko happened to let the bag out of her sight for a moment, well, whatever happened, happened. When they arrived, both girls picked up the sounds of argument yet again. Only this time there was no mistaking one of the voices. Nonami. She was in an apparently one-sided argument with a woman who had long, shaggy brown hair hanging down her back. At their approach, the woman snapped around to be revealed as Christina Pavlovic, Nonami's head of security. Realizing the two were Nonami's teammates, she briefly acknowledged them with a head tilt before returning her attention to Nonami. "Oh, good, Emiko, Usuko," sighed the vampire in relief. "You made it. Maybe one of you can try to talk some sense into her. I tried, but she's like a brick wall." "As I said, when you're out doing your gardener stuff, it's one thing. You're doing it for the people, and I get it," she explained grumpily, her trademark lisp now rearing its head once more. "But this is a dangerous place, and you're not doing hero stuff here, you're training. I won't allow you to go without my protection. I failed you once, I won't do it again." "And as I keep saying," replied Nonami, virtually on the verge of tears from frustration, "it's not like I'm going to be alone. "That's right," interrupted Christina, "because I will be there protecting you." Nonami kept her mouth shut, making a sound like a muffled scream from behind her lips. "Oh, just let her come," laughed Emiko. "What's the worst that could happen?" As they had been talking, an eerie fog had begun rolling in, quickly becoming so thick that Usuko could barely see her hand in front of her face. In the distance, she heard a ship's horn blaring, but the sound was distorted and strange in a way she couldn't describe. The sound of sloshing waves, though, told her something in the water was approaching, and the sudden chill in the air made Usuko wonder just what she was getting into. The fog began to lift just a bit, and Usuko could see a tall, thin man walking towards them. He was an older gentleman, with a thin mustache and a slightly receding hairline, but exuded an aura of class that she couldn't explain. When he spoke, his voice sounded exactly what you might expect a haunted house to sound like. Booming, yet with a crackle like bones, and just a hint of morbid excitement. Okay, this is supposed to be, what's his name? Vincent Price? But I can't do a Vincent Price impression to save my life, so just pretend it's Vincent Price's voice, okay? "A pleasure to see you again, your majesties," he said to both Nonami and Emiko with a bow. "My ship and crew are ready to take you to your destination. But remind me again, how many are accompanying you?" "Myself, Princess Ayame, Ms. O'Malley, Usuko Takibana, Rei Kobayashi, Hyoka Kagari, and..." Nonami sighed heavily. "And Christina." "Ah, very good. Right this way then, ladies," he said, turning back to the ship. As he did so, Usuko noticed a pair of fangs glinting in his mouth. Another vampire. That explained why he addressed Nonami that way. Was the whole crew vampires? It would be interesting to know, as Nonami had been, for the most part, the only vampire Usuko had known. A small part of her was a little worried about that, but she knew if anything happened at all, that Nonami would make the perpetrator wish they were dead. Once on board, Usuko took a moment to marvel at just how spooky the ship looked. It was less like any seafaring vessel she'd ever seen, and more like a floating funeral parlor. The corridors were covered in old, possibly Victorian-era wallpaper, or at least seemed to be. The lights were an off-yellow orange, again like something from the past. A tap on her shoulder brought Usuko back to reality. It was the captain. "Ms. Takibana, it is a pleasure to make your acquaintance," he said, bowing curtly. "Her Majesty has already informed me that you are her relative, and were only recently made aware of our world. I can assure you, you will find only friends aboard the Tingler. And if you know Vincent Price movies, you get the reference." Yeah, stumbled Usuko. "Thank you, Mr.
"Prince. Vince T. Prince," he said with a small smile, offering his hand. "At your service." Shaking his hand, a realization hit her.
"Wait, you mean like the actor? But didn't he, or you,
"Die?" replied Vince with a wry smile. "Well, I suppose it did have to happen eventually. You stay in the public eye too long without changing your appearance, people start to get suspicious. The curse of being a vampire actor in this modern era, I suppose." When he looked at her again, Usuko's eyes were sparkling. What Vince was about to learn was that the Pinkette was a huge fan of his films, owning just about every one she could get her hands on. It took several minutes of convincing from Emiko to let the captain go so he could attend his other duties, much to Usuko's regret. Nonami promised she would get him to sign some of her older merch at a later date, things that had existed before he'd died. About an hour later, and both Ray and the spirits were nowhere to be seen, and the three girls were relaxing on the deck, as Christina stayed on the gangway, keeping watch. Usuko was worried that the Oni may have gotten lost in the fog the ship gave off, and offered to look for her, but Nonami stopped her. If she got lost too, the boat might leave without her as well. Ray could feasibly catch up if she followed the fog, and it's not like her or Sarah didn't know the way to Kaiju Island. It was just a whole lot less taxing to go by boat than by air.
"Can't they just, turn off the fog?"
huffed Usuko.
"Theoretically," replied Nonami, "but if you could see the ship's appearance, you'd know why the fog was necessary. It's a Dutchman-class ghost ship. They look run down and wrecked by design. This one in particular is practically a floating haunted house."
Off the port side, there came a commotion, as apparently Christina had smelled something approaching that wasn't one of the team and had begun howling. Rushing to the side of the boat, they could just barely make out the figure of Ray in Oni form wrestling with something.
"Screw getting lost! We gotta help her!"
shouted Usuko, already in magical girl form and flying towards her friend. Her wings had gotten strong enough now that she was able to use them to fly short distances like this, and she put every ounce of those muscles to the test as she sailed to the ground, rolling on impact and calling on her spear. Gripping the weapon tightly, she aimed the tip to where whatever it was attacking Ray was. Something must have been wrong, because Ray should have been easily able to burn off the writhing mass that was clinging to her.
"Ray, I'm right here!" called Usuko. "Hold still! I'll try and laser it off!"
"No, Usuko! Away put your weapon! They mean me no harm!" The fog began to fade then, and Usuko was able to better make out what exactly it was attached to Ray. A mass of roughly 4 children, aged anywhere from 12 to 3, and standing nearby were 2 incredibly mortified teens. All of them had red hair and purple eyes, and 3 of the girls there could have easily been mistaken for younger versions of Ray.
"My, family is, very enthusiastic about goodbyes,"
said an embarrassed Ray as she swapped back to human form.
"The little ones especially. They hate to see me go. Brings back bad memories."
Usuko nodded.
"So does that make you the oldest?"
she asked. Ray shook her head and laughed.
I'm the middle child, actually. Used to be out of 13, now 12. These are my younger siblings, as my older ones are, off all over the world." She pointed to each of the little ones in turn, from youngest to oldest.
Rina, Mayuki, Asuna, Nob, Shiro, and Miko.
Ray giggled.
My older sisters are Mizore, Kuri, Nana, Ichigo, and Maki. At least, those are their human names at any rate.
The Oni turned to her family, motioning for the two eldest to join them. Once everyone was in a big circle, they shared an enormous group hug that lasted a solid minute. When it was done, Ray picked up her bag that she had dropped during the commotion and made her way towards the ship as her family waved farewell.
Wow, you sure have a big family, Ray,
said an impressed Usuko.
I mean, I had trouble just leaving Kuriko behind. I can't imagine what it's like. Yeah, it can be pretty chaotic,
admitted Ray with a shrug.
One thing you learn quick is if you don't shout, you don't get heard. Oh, and sharing a bed with 3 other kids growing up sucks. Especially when one of them's a kicker.
She laughed, and so did Usuko. Now outside the ship again, and without the fog, Usuko was able to get a much better look at the vessel, and wondered how in God's name it was seaworthy. The bow was practically caved in, snapped black and green boards looking for all the world like the teeth of a great sea monster. The sails, for it was a sailing ship, were rotted and full of holes and mismatched patches that had... Oh my god. I'm sorry, I'm reading poorly tonight. Full of holes and mismatched patches that seemed to have been hastily added. All across the sides were missing boards, jagged holes, and more than once Usuko could have sworn she saw a spectral, tentacled face peering back through one of the barnacle-crusted portholes. This image clashed greatly with the ship's interior, which, while perhaps a bit cramped, was elegant and classy. Even the deck, while admittedly not pristine, didn't look at all like it was part of the ship she was staring at now.
How is this hunk of junk gonna get us anywhere except the bottom of the sea?
She muttered to herself as she climbed back aboard. As if the ship had heard her, one of the floorboards snapped and her ankle went into an empty, wet space. She couldn't help but yelp as Ray lifted her back up and out. "I am terribly sorry, Ms. Takibana," came the voice of Vince from around the corner. "These old ships, they tend to have a life of their own, it seems, sometimes, and they dislike being insulted."
I'm sorry,"
she apologized with a shrug. "No apology needed. I think she's satisfied," he replied, stroking the wall gently, like one might a cat. So that's Ray accounted for," said Emiko, after the two shared a blink-and-you'll-miss-it hug. "All that's left is Sarah and—"
"Hyoka!"
yelled Sarah, nearly unleashing a banshee shriek by accident, though a gust of wind created by her frustration caused some of the fresh powdery snow to whip around. She had been waiting outside the girl's house for about an hour now, and was nearly at the end of her rope. She knew Hyoka was in there. She'd told Sarah she just needed to say goodbye to Junji and Gohan, but even a usually light-hearted Sarah was starting to get annoyed. Long goodbyes were one thing, but come on. The door opened then, and a sheepish Hyoka motioned for Sarah to come in. Restraining herself from rolling her eyes, Sarah followed. Once inside, Hyoka held up her left hand, and upon its 4th finger was a diamond ring.
"Junji proposed!"
she giggled excitedly. "I'm very, very sorry we made you wait, O'Malley-san," apologized Junji. "I just couldn't wait any longer. The last time I hesitated was in August, and you know that story." It had been Sarah who had been there and helped Hyoka recall her lost memories not too long ago, including the painful memory of how she'd been killed by the psychopathic Lamia, Mizuho Kirishima. Now at last, with their being reunited, he was able to finally propose to the woman he loved.
"Congratulations, both of ya," smiled Sarah. "And I hate to cut this short, I do.
but we really gotta get going.
Hyoka nodded, sharing one last kiss with Junji before sprinting out the door with Sarah in tow. Junji watched them go, with a mix of happiness and concern. He hated the idea of being away from Hyoka again, so soon after they'd reunited, but he knew she had responsibilities as part of Nonami's still unnamed unit. At least as a ghost, she'd be a lot safer. From behind him, he heard Gohan grunt something in a concerned tone, the Yeti laying a massive paw on his shoulder. "Yeah, I think they'll be alright, big guy," said Junji. "She'll be in great company, after all. Come on, let's fix some breakfast, huh?" Gohan let out a loud guffaw. "Oh, come on, my cooking isn't that bad." 20 minutes later, and the spirits made it to the docks. Just beating the first signs of dawn by half an hour. 10 minutes later, and with the fog having returned in full force, the Tingler was on her way to Kaiju Island. No one knew what they could expect to find. No one knew what they could expect on that fabled place, or if they'd managed to find any of the amulets of power.
But if nothing else,
thought Usuko an hour after departure, changing into her frilly black bikini before stretching out onto a deck chair to get some rays,
it might be fun. Dangerous fun, but fun. Mind if I join you?
The voice was Nonami's, also wearing a swimsuit of her own, a black lace-embroidered red bikini with a black ribbon tying the top together in the front. Seeing her dressed that way shocked Usuko, but she figured Nonami knew what she was doing.
Sure,
she replied, peering over the book Nonami had given her months ago, The History of Monsters.
But, won't you, burn?
Not at all, laughed Nonami, settling in next to Usuko's chair.
This fog blocks UV, so it's perfect for vampires who want to ditch that pale complexion for a while. You should be fine as well, Usuko. Since you're still technically a quarter vampire, even if you don't show it, you should still be able to reap the benefits. Huh. That explains a lot, come to think,
replied Usuko.
Always could get a tan pretty easy. Huh, neat.
On the opposite side of the deck, Ray was also trying to catch some sun, but, not being a vampire, she was finding out it might be more difficult. Grunting in frustration, she flipped onto her belly and saw Emiko approaching in a fancy, high-end green swimsuit. "Hey, Kobayashi-san," said Emiko, still not on a first-name basis with her red counterpart. "You got a minute?"
Yeah, sure,
chirped Ray.
Could you, do me a favor, though? Unhook my bikini in the back. If I manage to get a tan with all this fog, I'd like it to be even, you know?
Sure, blushed Emiko, deftly undoing the simple clip that held the tiger-striped top in place. Ray was one of those classic Oni who still favored the old style of clothing, it seemed.
Thanks, she sighed. I was kind of worried about that. Anyway, sup?
Oh, you know, the usual, replied Emmy with a dismissive hand wave. If it's not schoolwork, it's paperwork, or training. I barely have any time for myself these days, let alone for Usuko.
Yeah, I feel ya, Ayame-san,
admitted Ray.
Much as I love this job, it has a tendency to, sort of rule your life if you aren't careful. I'm the third of my siblings to work for Gardner, you know? And they both said the same thing. It's hell on your free time.
Emiko sighed, nodding. Still, I wanted to thank you, Kobayashi. You're the one who gave me the push I needed to confess to Usuko, what I've known for a long time. Red Oni or not, I'd be proud to call you my friend. Ray's eyes went a bit wide then. Friendships between Reds and Blues weren't unheard of, but they weren't exactly common, let alone between royalty and a regular girl like Ray. Still, she stuck out her hand towards Emiko, smiling.
Likewise, and from now on, it's Ray.
Emiko, or Emmy, replied Emiko, shaking Ray's hand. Only Usuko gets to call me Emmy-chan, though. She winked playfully, and the two Oni shared a friendly laugh.
Sarah and Hyoka, meanwhile, were seated near Usuko, the latter trying to get Sarah to finish the story she'd started a while back, about when she first met Nonami. Intrigued by this, Usuko set her book down and asked if Sarah would mind telling it again. Begrudgingly, the Banshee started from the beginning, recounting her arrival at Castle Orlok, meeting the young Maria, and the humdrum nothingness that led up to the incident on the vampire's birthday. That was when Usuko's eyes nearly bugged out of her head. Wait, she said, baffled. You're telling me my grandma did that? Sarah glanced up, the look in her eyes suggesting that she hadn't made the connection till now. Aye, and now that I think about it, Nanami was right. Ye are her splitting image. Only difference is she had reddish-black hair and red eyes, of course. Even kind of sound like her, come to think. Freaky. There was your grandma? Exclaimed Hyoka. So that makes Nonami your, let me think. Great aunt, yes, confirmed Nonami, not glancing up from her own book. And Sarah, dear, I know there's a fine line between embellishment and deceit. Try not to cross it so much. You tell the story like I was still a child. Because you were, replied Sarah flatly. 15 is still a child in just about anyone's estimation. No offense, Usuko. None taken? Answered Usuko. Well, anyway, what happened next? How did it all end? Did Nonami's dad come back to save the day? Nay, by the time Lord Von Orlok returned home... Well, let me skip ahead to that part, I guess. Sorry, I'm a little stuffed up for some reason right now. Sorry. A frantic knocking at her chamber door woke Sarah from an otherwise peaceful rest. Though no longer requiring sleep as a spirit, she was still able to perform the act in order to regenerate energy faster, or just shut her mind off for a while. She tried not to do it while on a job, but the stress levels she was experiencing on this one in particular were giving her a migraine. Still, she knew panicked knocking when she heard it, so she rushed out of bed, levitating a robe to cover her bare figure as she opened the door. What's wrong? She asked the maid who had been knocking. Instead of replying, the maid slumped over and disintegrated into ash as a blade came thrusting towards Sarah. Rolling back, the Banshee barely had any time to react as the door burst off its hinges and slammed against the wall next to her. "Aw, I missed," came the sadistically gleeful voice of Farah as she strutted into the room. "This used to be my bedroom, you know." "Oh my, you should really put something on, you know. You might catch your death." To punctuate her statement, Farah swiped at Sarah once again, the blade of her sword cutting some of Sarah's silver hair off and just missing her face. "If you'd give me a second, I'd be happy to oblige ya," retorted Sarah, calling on the only weapon she could at the moment, the O'Malley clan's saber. Silver-green blade in hand, she met Farah's strikes with her own, using her free hand to try and keep her robe closed. That sword of Farah's could cut spirits, which definitely gave Sarah cause for concern. Second death was a lot more permanent than the first one, but was fortunately a very rare phenomenon. A few weapons that could harm her kind did exist, she knew, but they were so rare as to be effectively non-existent. Just her luck this crazed vampire would have one. If she could just manage to destroy it, or at least knock it away, Sarah knew she could win this fight. But it didn't make sense. Why was Farah here now? If she wanted to hurt her, wouldn't she have wanted to first make sure Maria was... "Where's Maria?" demanded Sarah, her eyes flickering from yellow-green to fiery red, her voice pitching down a few octaves. My, you finally got it, huh?" laughed Farah as their duel continued. "She's safe for now. We have plans for her, you see. Oh, such plans. And besides, I wouldn't want to have to hurt my darling baby sister now. She's in the castle, if you must know. Not that it'll do you any good, ghost." Sarah laughed as well then. A brief laugh. The kind of laugh you would hear from someone who just figured out they'd won. "Ghost?" she asked. "Lassie, I'm afraid I'm no mere ghost." Sarah's form began to twist, her limbs growing long and gnarled, her hair turning wiry and frayed, and her face became long, gaunt, with sunken eyes that glowed like two burning embers. She resembled an old hag now, a being ripped straight from the nightmares of her homeland. "I'm a banshee," she whispered, knocking the blade from Farah's palm with a slap from her wide... Sorry, I misread that. Knocking the blade from Farah's hand with a slap from her wide skeletal palm and sending it careening out a nearby window. There was a look of fear on the vampire's face that wasn't there before. She clearly hadn't been expecting Sarah to be anything more than a simple ghost. Instead, she was now face to face with a being that, if she so chose, could quite literally suck the soul from her body. "Do not mess with a banshee." Sarah unleashed a scream that rocked Farah to her core, falling to her knees with her hands pressed tight to her bleeding ears. Stop it! Please, I beg, no more!" she cried, and Sarah did. As quickly as she'd transformed before, Sarah was now her previous self again, standing over Farah with her sword pressed to her neck. "I'd kill you now if I wasn't sure your father wants you alive," she announced. "What's more is I need you to take me to Maria. Now, lead the way, and you might just keep all your body parts." With some hesitation, the vampire slowly stood up and made her way towards the door, only to find the blade slicing into her arm. Farah shot the banshee an angry, confused look. Sarah motioned to the outfit laying on the dresser. "I'm not going out in a robe, lass. Stand there while I get dressed. Oh, and if you try to run, I'll humble your legs faster than you can say oops." Quickly dressing, Sarah motioned with her sword for Farah to follow. To show the way. They began making their way down the tower stairway, passing a few more piles of ashen clothes that had once been castle maids. Sarah knew each one of them by name now, and took each one's death personally. If she could have it her way, she'd take a finger for each of Farah's victims. Gloria, Constance, Victoria, and poor Josephine, who'd been the one who was pounding on Sarah's door. Of course, she doubted she'd be allowed to have her style of revenge, so she'd have to settle for whatever punishment was chosen once Count Lugosi returned. They were in the library now, Farah activating the mechanism that opened the hidden passageway to her father's death. They were in the library now, Farah activating the mechanism that opened the hidden passageway to her father's den. If Sarah expected to find Maria in there, she was destined to be disappointed. "All right, you've led me this far," said Sarah calmly but firmly. "Where is she? And no tricks, or it's chop chop." "Obviously we're not there yet, Banshee," she quickly corrected herself. "Give me a moment to work the door." Farah walked over to a nearby closet, opening it and pulling a lever hidden behind some cloaks. On the same wall, on the opposite end of the room, a bookcase slid back, revealing a second lever. At the same time, a part of the floor slid away near Sarah, revealing a third lever. "We have to pull these two in quick succession, or the whole process starts over again," explained Farah. "I pull mine, you pull yours, door opens. Ready?" "Aye," answered Sarah, manifesting physically for a moment. With a heave, Farah pushed her lever forward. I'm so sorry. I'm botching this. I'm so sorry. Probably shouldn't have done this tonight. With a heave, Farah pushed her lever, followed almost instantly by Sarah pushing hers. As they watched, the fire that had been roaring in the fireplace was doused, and the brick wall behind it began sliding open. Brick by brick, it moved out of the way, as if by magic. When it was done, It revealed an ancient, dank, vertical drop that went down deep into the earth, with rickety cobblestone stairs leading down into the abyss below. Grabbing 2 torches off the wall, Farah began once again leading Sarah into the darkness below. It was so dark that you couldn't see the bottom, even once Farah dropped one of her torches down to try and light it up. Together, they scaled the treacherous steps for close to half an hour before Sarah could make out the faint light of the dropped torch down below. If she could have seen it, Sarah would have known that the shaft was completely vertical, with massive decaying stone columns holding the ceiling up. At the bottom there was nothing but stone, and a single tunnel which led to the catacombs. Even Count Lugosi himself tended to avoid this area, Farah told her, due in no small part to the creature that dwelled down there. "What sort of creature?" asked Sarah warily. "That's the thing," explained Farah, uncertainty creeping into her voice. "No one really knows for sure. Some say it used to be a vampire that got lost down here, went blood-starved, blind, and turned into something else. Others said it was the great sin of the Von Orlocks, whatever that means. I've never seen it, but I've heard it before. It's a sound you never forget." A bizarre, wet shriek echoed loudly through the brick and stone tunnels. So off-putting was it that even Sarah found herself suppressing an involuntary shudder. It didn't exactly sound human, but it also didn't sound like any creature she'd ever heard. "Is that your friend?" asked Sarah sarcastically. Farah nodded. A look of terror beyond even what Sarah had inflicted on her earlier was etched onto her features. "I've never heard it this clearly before. It must be close. I'll find Maria." Sarah placed her sword in front of Farah to stop her. "Nay, we'll find her. You lead. Remember, I'm not letting you out of my sight." The vampire gulped, nodding, and turned back to face the foreboding entryway to the family's catacombs. The air in there was stale and heavy, and dripping water could be heard striking the stones on the ground. There were many cobwebs all along the walls, some even stretching across the entire tunnel. Not that they were of any concern to the intangible Sarah. Fortunately, they didn't have far to walk to find Maria. Obviously, Farah had kept her close to the entrance in order to be in and out as fast as she could be. Sarah scooped her up, carrying the still sleeping Maria in her arms, and turned back to Farah. "I'm gonna return her to her bed now," explained Sarah. "You're gonna wait here until I come back for you, and if you aren't still here when I come back, you won't like it." Not waiting for Farah's confirmation, Sarah made her way back to the entrance before beginning to float up the middle of the chamber. She had just made it to the top when a scream rang up through the air. It was unmistakably Farah. Knowing she probably didn't have enough time to take Maria back to her room, Sarah gently placed her in the chair, covering her with a nearby cloak to keep her warm, and rocketed back down the chamber. When she returned to where Farah had been, she could find no sign of her foe. At first, Sarah thought it was a trick and prepared for an ambush, but that's when she saw the blood on the ground. Something had attacked her, and immediately Sarah's mind went to the screech they'd heard a few minutes ago. "Well, this just got interesting," sighed Sarah. Fortunately for Sarah, there was a thin blood trail for her to follow, which she did for a few moments. When it did eventually come to an end, though, she at first wondered where Farah had gone, as she was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps she had simply stopped bleeding? Then another dripping sound echoed in the room. Looking down, Sarah found a small red puddle on the ground. Looking up, she saw Farah wrapped up in some sort of cocoon,
a good portion of which was stained with her blood. A muffled sound could be heard coming from her, likely a cry for help. For a moment, Sarah considered leaving her there, but decided against it. Again, Count von Orlok would likely want to administer his own punishment on his rogue daughter, and leaving her at the mercy of whatever did this would probably not make him happy. "Hold still, I'll cut you down," said Sarah, floating up to begin cutting the connections to the wall. When she was about halfway through, the sound of something large shuffling towards them could be heard. Farah screamed again, causing Sarah to roll her eyes. For some big, scary vampire, she sure did scream a lot. Then again, when the creature came around the corner and into the torchlight, Sarah began to understand the screaming. It was monstrous, about 7 feet tall and pale. Thick rolls of soft, slimy flesh covered its body, as it lumbered in on 2 velociraptor-like legs, complete with razor-sharp talons. Its arms were long and warped, with hands that ended in what could only be described as flesh scythes. Running along the outside edge of the arms was a strange, clear film that might one day become a pair of cicada-like wings. Its face had clearly once been human, or perhaps vampire, but now was barely recognizable, with flesh covering the eye sockets, a flattened nose, a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth, and a large pair of bat-like ears that seemed capable of independent movement. Sarah had never seen anything like it, and even knowing she had the advantage of intangibility, she still hesitated before attacking it. Her goal was only to drive it off. She had no qualms with the creature. Clearly, it was trapped down here anyway. The easiest way to do that, she decided, was to use her banshee sound powers, as it was clearly blind and likely relied solely on hearing or echolocation to get around. "Farah, if you're able, cover your ears. If you can't, then I do apologize for this." Turning to face the creature, Sarah unleashed a powerful sonic scream that sent the creature, which she had decided to call a blood beast, flying back. Hissing in pain from both the impact against the wall and the headache it had been given, the blood beast scrambled off into the darkness, allowing Sarah to free Farah from the strange cocoon and for the two of them to make it back to the den. Thank you, muttered Farah as they returned. "You saved my life, even after everything I'd done. Why?" Why indeed, thought Sarah. Sure, she had told herself it was for Lugosi's sake, but she knew better than that. For all Sarah's cold and professional exterior, deep down she was a good person, and good people don't leave others to die. Even when they're awful people, and sometimes especially when they're awful. "If you want her to pay me, you can walk your way right into a cell and stay there till the Count returns," said Sarah firmly. Otherwise, I can always knock you out myself and put you there myself." Farah nodded and did just that, making her way to the castle's dungeon and locking herself in the cell farthest from the door. She'd never admit it, but she chose that one specifically to be as far from the blood beast as possible. And somewhere, deep below the castle, the blood beast licked its wounds and waited. Its metamorphosis would be complete eventually. It just needed time. Blood and time. That warm one, it would have been almost enough, it knew, but the cold one had taken it beyond its grasp. For now. About a month later, Count Lugosi returned home empty-handed, finished Sarah to a rapt audience. Even some of the crewmen had gathered around by now. His quest to bring Karloff back had failed, and nearly resulted in his death. He was happy to know I'd caught Farah, though when I told him about the beast,
He didn't seem to know what I was on about. Regardless, he hired me on for about another century or so as Maria's personal guard, and during that time we became such close friends. She even retrieved that sword of Farah's and had it reforged into a scythe for me. I gave it back to her when I eventually had to leave, but now it's back with me again. Wow! Exclaimed Usako. But what happened to my grandma? I mean, she eventually escaped, I guess, right? Nay, well, actually, it's a bit more complex than that, replied Sarah. She had a bit of a change of heart, she did. Never earned anyone's trust, just enough to be released. But she was treated well enough in there. Eventually, though, an army of Overus led by Karloff came for her. Said they'd spare the castle if we surrendered her. She went willingly, but not because she wanted to, I think. Well, how do you know? Well, how do you know? Asked Emiko. She told me of a vision she had. Apparently, she'd always had a knack for prophetic vision for a long time. She mentioned how someday a light from the sea would challenge the forces of shadow, that she needed to go with them for the prophecy to come true. Sarah shrugged. I always assumed she was full of it, but a few of her other visions came true. A war for a new nation's soul, which would pit brother against brother. The American Civil War. A great metal tower spewing fire beyond the sky to perch upon the moon landing. All of the world at war with itself, ending in tragedy for too many. Could be either world war. Bear in mind now, all of these were in the early to middle 1800s. Graham always did seem to know when I was acting up, said Usako with a chuckle. I guess you'd already seen it. I want to know something though, Sarah. My grandma, was she ever remorseful for the people she killed? The banshee closed her eyes and sighed heavily. Usko, times like these, I wish I could lie to you and say she was. The truth of the matter is, I don't know. If she did, she never told me. Sarah paused for a second. But there were times I think she was. You exist as long as I have. You learn to read people pretty well. She may never have said as much, but little things she did or said whenever it came up, I think a part of her may have. Farah had a thing about her pride, said Nonami, leaning over Usako's shoulder. She could never admit when she was wrong or had messed up. But I agree with Sarah. I think she probably regretted what she had done. At any rate, I suppose we'll never know. What do you mean? Asked the puzzled Usako. Granny's still alive, you know. She just lives in America. Nonami fell backwards out of her chair, shocked by the revelation. All this time she thought her sister was gone, dead and buried. But you always would refer to her in the past tense, she exclaimed. Yeah, I guess so, huh? Replied Usako sheepishly. Sorry, I probably should have told you sooner, huh? Indeed, replied Nonami, readjusting the sunglasses that had gone diagonal across her face. Normally I'd keep going, but that's a goodish stopping point, and I guess I'm more tired than I thought I was, so I think, yeah, we're gonna end that there for tonight. If I'm feeling better tomorrow, we'll do another one. But, oh god, I feel like I'm letting y'all down with the quality of this one. Ugh. But, aside from my constant vocal flubs this time around, are you enjoying the story of Terror Firma so far? I would very much like to know if you did. You just got here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I have the videos on my YouTube channel for the first 2 books. If you want to check those out later. I mean, okay, if y'all want me to keep going, I can keep going. I just feel like I'm so tired that I feel like all my vocal flubs are really just kind of yeah. But I'll do another one tomorrow. We'll continue tomorrow, unless, you know, like I said, I'm too tired. But yeah, other than that, Yeah, I hope you did. I do hope you did enjoy despite all that. I love getting to read my books to you, to all of you. It really is a great feeling. Until next time, everyone. Have a good night. Yeah, have a good night. Take care. And bye, Anara.